Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to introduce Saskatchewan's Premier, the Honourable Brad Wall. On behalf of SUMA, the board, and our 450 urban government members, I want to extend our appreciation to the Premier for his participation this morning. SUMA has built an excellent working relationship with the Premier, his cabinet, and their ministries. We are pleased to partner with the provincial government to improve the quality of life and opportunities for the 82% of Saskatchewan people that live in urban areas. We appreciate this relationship we have built with the government, and that Premier Wall and members of the Cabinet take the time to attend convention and take your questions on Wednesday. Mr. Premier, you have said many times since our last convention that you're focused on growth in Saskatchewan, both the opportunities and challenges it offers. We see a parallel goal as we strive to make the most of the growth we see in our communities all over the province. We look forward to continuing a partnership to make Saskatchewan strong. Fellow delegates, please join me in extending a warm SUMA welcome to the leader of our dynamic province, our Premier, the Honourable Brad Wall.
Thanks very much, Alan. Hey, everybody. Oh, that's okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for the chance to be here with you today. President Earl, members of the SUMA Executive, mayors and councillors, delegates, ministers of the Crown, and MLAs from both sides of the House, I would expect, that have joined us today. It is a privilege to be here again to talk a little bit about the future, talk a bit about the current budget upcoming, and also to acknowledge the leadership of our local governments in the province and to thank them for that leadership as well. I understand yesterday you had a session called How to Lobby Your MLA. I hope someone was taking notes and that you might send them to me. There's a few more of us now and we could always get better at that. I guess one of the points of advice from somebody who was at the session was that to you delegates was never embarrass the government. It's funny, that's what some of our veteran MLAs tell our rookie MLAs as well, and probably interested in those notes. Whether you are a mayor or a councillor or serving at a provincial level, I think it's also important that we are ready for all emergencies, all exigencies as they might present themselves, and so I don't see Mayor Fougere here just from this vantage point. There he is. Michael, you and I, we're going to, after this is done, we're going to go to Mosaic and we're going to check the breaker box. In the 1990s, I had a bit of a business, contracted myself out to organizations and did a number of different things, and one of them was selling memberships and working hard to try to develop the Southwest tourism region. It had been the Horseshoe region, and there had been a reconstitution of these things, and I was hired, or my company was hired on a contract to go sell memberships. And one of the members of the board that hired me was a fellow by the name of Sam Boychuk. Sam was then the owner and proprietor of a place called the Commercial Hotel in Maple Creek, Saskatchewan, Canada. And so when I went to see him and visit him as a board member, he gave me the in-depth tour of that particular establishment. And this is an amazing place in our province. At front of this hotel remains today a hitching post. Inside that hotel, when I toured it, and I hope still, were Charlie Russell paintings, the famous cowboy artist Charlie Russell paintings. I think prints, but prints. If they're originals, there should be locks on the door. Amazing artifacts and a marble floor, and it didn't take much of an imagination to picture cowboys coming into that place 128 years ago and horses tied up at the hitching post. It's really a spectacular place in our province and in a great community of Maple Creek. But as Mayor Rudd would tell you, the flood of 2010 took its toll on that particular establishment, and it's been quiet for a while, but quiet no longer. Late last year, I understand a company with 7 shareholders bought that hotel. Work is already underway to restore the Commercial to its former glory. The 7 shareholders, delegates to SUMA, are all Filipinos, recent immigrants to the town of Maple Creek. Profit, I'm sure, is part of their motivation. Yeah. profit or wealth creation or leaving something better for their kids. I'm sure that's part of the motivation, and so it should be, but part of their motivation was also that they wanted to give something back to their community. Here's what Noy Lim, the group spokesman, told the Maple Creek News on the purchase. Quote, "When we arrived here in Maple Creek, the town really welcomed us with huge smiles and embraced us. It's not always that you should be on the receiving end. You have to give something." Ladies and gentlemen, those among us who are lifetime residents of the province of Saskatchewan are served well when we hear the perspectives of those who have arrived anew. And if we look at our province through their eyes, I think we will see a province that today serves as a beacon of hope in a troubled world, just as it did 100 years ago. That might sound like hyperbole to some, but not to these 7 shareholders, and not to the thousands of newcomers who have agreed that this place is a place of hope and opportunity and have come. I know that's a concept that we're getting used to again in Saskatchewan. Something we're still coming to terms with. But that's how our province is now perceived by the thousands of immigrants and expatriates who've come back home over the last number of years. And all of you in this room, new councillors, new elected officials, and KG veteran elected officials, ought to be thanked for your leadership in creating that place, in restoring that hope and that opportunity to our great province. And on behalf of the province, I offer that thank you this morning. This is actually our first chance to visit since many of you have been either re-elected or elected for the first time. So I do want to congratulate everybody on their election. We are very fortunate in Saskatchewan to have strong local leadership. I was reminded of this in very clear and compelling ways just before Christmas when we had a chance to tour the BHP mine site. And then, because of the work of our MLA and former Melfort Mayor Kevin Phillips and Donna Harpower, we had a chance to meet with the mayors of towns of the city of Humboldt. Mayor Eaton was there, and the Reeves from surrounding RMs were there as well. We heard a lot about the challenges those communities are facing because of growth. Challenges they welcomed the growth, but challenges they needed to meet nonetheless. I just want to tell you this morning how impressed I was, and said so to Kevin and Donna as we left, and other government officials. I phoned the Minister Jim Ryder right after we met. How impressed I was with the willingness of the municipalities in that Humboldt area to work together, to turn their back on rivalries probably that stretch back 100 years and manifest themselves in hockey rinks every winter, to decide that notwithstanding the fact that their RM or their town or their city had different interests by definition, that their broader interests, their regional interests were more important, and the ratepayers they represented were first and foremost citizens of the province of Saskatchewan, of a new Saskatchewan that was growing, and so they were prepared to cooperate, to work regionally. I want to say this today before I get into the text of my remarks, and if this is a message, then so be it. I left there thinking if our government has some capacity in the future, some fiscal capacity to invest a little bit more to help those communities or help all of you deal with infrastructure challenges, and if there's a ranking of areas where that will receive that money, I think we're probably going to choose those regions that have demonstrated that big vision and that leadership first and foremost. And to the Humboldt city of Humboldt and area, and to other regions in the province, and I know there are others that are working together in this way, let me just say thank you. Let me encourage all of us to have the resolve, including our government, to recognize that that regional cooperation is the best way we can ensure that we do meet the challenges of growth and sustain growth on into the future. Thanks to projects like the Jansen Lake Mine, by the way, and companies like BHP, investment in our province has surpassed $20 billion last year. That's a brand new record. Today, investment continues to come into the province. New people are coming here to Saskatchewan. In the past year, our population grew at a rate we haven't seen in 90 years, since many of you were first elected here. I'm looking right at, there's Barry Gunter right in the front row. We have to do one gratuitous shot at Barry before. In the past 6 years, the province has grown by nearly 94,000 people. That's 2 Moose Jaws and 2 Swift Currents. Immigrants are coming here from 175 countries, settling in more than 345 communities, not just the cities, but rural areas, towns, and villages. There were close to 11,000 newcomers in 2012 alone. Immigrants are coming here. Expatriates are coming back. Why are they coming back? Well, we have a great quality of life to offer. You do a lot of that work. But first and foremost, there needs to be a job or a business opportunity or an investment opportunity. There needs to be economic opportunity. We're grateful to have the second lowest unemployment rate in the country with a record number of people working. We're happy to see that our employers are paying more. We've seen record growth in the average weekly earnings. And even today, if you checked out saskjobs.ca, there are 12,000 jobs that remain unfilled. We must never be complacent about this fundamental fact. While growth is not the end game for us, and more on that in a moment, that growth, the opportunity that's there, is the reason why we can have this debate about how we deal with the challenges of growth and where we're going to find the infrastructure to keep up with new people moving in, because that problem, ladies and gentlemen, I hope we all agree, is much more desirable than the problem of buying suitcases at graduation for our kids because they were going somewhere else to find a job. Growth is a great thing. It's not an end in itself. It's not the final step on this journey we're on to build better communities and a better province. You've heard me say it many, many times before. Growth is a means to an end. Growth expands our tax base. Then growth allows governments to invest more in highways. I think SARM says we're good now. We're done with roads and highways. We don't need to do anymore. No, they're not. There's no buns to throw here, Dave. It allows us to invest more in highways, more work's needed, more in education, more in health care, more in recreation, more in parks, in the quality of life, and a broader tax base and more robust revenues allows for strong revenue sharing with those who are on the front line of growth, the people that I'm looking at this morning. The President's already touched on this, but I'm going to repeat it. In the coming year, municipalities are expected to receive $264 million. That's up from $237 million this year in revenue sharing. That's more than an 11% increase year over year, and will be more than double what was paid out in 2007. More than double what was paid out in 2007. For Saskatoon, revenue sharing is up 137%. Regina, 133%. Moose Jaw, 124%. Prince Albert, 122%. La Ronge, 139%. Kindersley, 108%, just to name a few. We had a lot of catching up to do, though, didn't we, in terms of proper revenue sharing for the municipal sector. We readily recognized the fact that for a very long time, municipalities were going without in terms of proper revenue sharing. Still, there is no third party in this province, the government funds, that has received this kind of funding. That doubling in funding to municipalities has come at a time when the province's revenues have only increased by 44%. We're great, 44% is pretty good. But the revenue sharing principle, you remember, was predictability, and that your revenue sharing would grow with provincial revenues. Well, I'm happy to say, and I think you're happy, I know you are from the ad, that the revenue sharing has grown by a much larger percentage than revenues to the province of Saskatchewan. At a time when post-secondary funding is up 37% in our first term, not an insignificant raise as well, again, over 100% in the municipal sector. By the way, in healthcare, when you combine the regions and the cancer agency, they're up 42% over the same time period. The system we have in place is based on a solemn commitment and a promise, and I think it's a recognition, it needs to be a recognition that you are on the front lines of growth, and there does need to be a sharing of revenue, and that's going to continue. It's not perfection, the formula or even our relationship. The distribution formula, as you know, was up for review. The minister asked SUMA and SARM to come together and hammer out a consensus, a compromise on changes to the distribution formula. That didn't happen. That's disappointing. But both groups had an opportunity to identify their positions. We know where you stand. Minister Ryder will speak more about this later in convention, and the province will make a decision. As we move forward, though, I just want to offer a caution that we focus not too much in terms of the change in the distribution formula as a means to deal with financial pressures. All governments, our government and your government and rural governments, must first look at containing their costs. We all must be focused, even at a time of growth, especially at a time of growth, I would say, in ensuring that our fiscal health is sustainable for the long term, that we are watching our budgets. Our government isn't perfect in this regard, but we are trying. We are trying with some success to keep a lid on spending. We've made a concerted effort to reduce our workforce by 15%. We're going to meet that goal. It was a 4-year target. We're utilizing lean processes across government, imperfectly but effectively on the whole, to enhance services and save money. And we need to continue to economize because, ladies and gentlemen, program spending will grow by less than 4%. That was forecast in our election platform in last year's budget. We also forecast a 4% increase in our election platform for a year ago for next year, and I could tell you it's going to be less than that. It's going to be less than that because revenues are soft. This might seem counterintuitive to people in the room. Frankly, it does to me sometimes when I get the reports. Because the economy is strong, and the economy is forecast to remain strong. We're forecast to be 1 or 2 by almost every chartered bank and prognosticator in the country. But as we saw in 2009, when we were about $2 billion short in the budget and our economy was still relatively strong, stronger than almost any place in the world, you can have a very strong economy and you can have tighter provincial revenues. We are facing, and we have now, and will continue to face, lower oil prices, even with oil at $97 West Texas. The reason is because of the differential that exists. The differential that we face in our province, though not as intense as what they're looking at in Alberta, is about $300 million on our budget in revenue. And the differential really is a double discount. Because our oil heads to Cushing to get sold, as you know. Half of it's sour or a little heavier, about, that's its ballpark. Half of it's lighter. The heavier oil, there's a discount for that because it requires more value added to get it to the point where it's ready to go to market. And there's also a discount because of a lack of pipeline capacity in North America today. So we can't move all we'd like to move as a province, and that means there's a differential. By the way, it's why our government will continue to speak out on issues like Keystone and Gateway, and I hope you'll join us. We need to move that energy out of this province. We need to focus on refining and upgrading more here, and we're going to do that, but we need to ensure we are supporting pipelines that make sense, that are still the most efficacious, environmentally safe way to move energy. We need to debunk myths about Canadian oil. It's not dirty. I'd stack up our record environmentally in the oil industry to any country in the Middle East or South America. And so we were grateful when 10 U.S. governors joined us in a letter to the President. And one governor in Montana, the Democratic governor there, who was on the press release saying, we need that Keystone approved, it's true, and we need other provinces to understand the importance of Canada as an energy power and approve pipelines across our jurisdiction. But our challenge, though, is there, fiscally. It's not as acute as I've said in Alberta. Why? Because our economy is more balanced. Our revenue sources are more balanced. That means we can have a balanced budget, and we will. But there will be tough choices to get there. There are third parties like universities today who are going through a lean effort, who are going through efficiency efforts to try to reduce their overall budgets. I welcome and acknowledge the leadership of both university presidents in this regard. Health regions have been doing the same thing. I think there's municipalities that are doing the same thing, but as I said, I hope our resolve is strong to make sure we're very careful on the fiscal side so we can sustain this for the long term. For our part, we're going to continue to try to pay off debt when we can. We've reduced the debt by about 44% since 2007, and we're going to focus on these third-party budgets we have. Other than SUMAs, other than the municipal sector, that'll grow at 11%, we're looking at roughly inflationary increases across the board. So there will be challenges that we're going to need to meet. I remember when 2009 happened, and we were about $2 billion short or so, thereabouts. All you really need to know is the 2 and the B, and that you're good. And ladies and gentlemen, there were economists from all over the world as recession hit that said, now John Maynard Keynes' philosophy tells us, now you deficit budget. Load it up. We chose not to do that on the operating account. We chose to move some things around and make some reductions. Here's why. Economists are the ones that make these recommendations, that you deficit finance at certain times in the economic cycle. But it's politicians of all stripes and of all persuasions that have to make the decisions to get it back to balance. Our first finance minister, Rod Ganefort, said, I wish the decisions were between smart and dumb, good and bad. But you know, and we know, often there are competing good projects or programs or efforts or infrastructure that you're faced with. And so politicians have a difficulty, more so than economists in the world of theory, to say, here's how we're going to get it back to balance, especially if it's deficit on deficit on deficit, and pretty soon your problem is measured in the billions of dollars, and you've given away an advantage that you've worked hard, that we've worked hard to build as a unique, fiscally strong jurisdiction, not just in Canada, but in North America. Fiscal responsibility is at the heart of our growth plan, Vision 2020 and beyond. There are other elements to it. I won't get into all the details, but there's a focus on innovation. We're going to continue to engage internationally, especially in Asia. We're going to look at our competitiveness in terms of regulation and taxes, and the labor shortage piece needs to be dealt with, and a big part of our growth plan is infrastructure. $5.6 billion in investments since we were first elected. That's about twice what was there in the 4 years prior to that, but there is, as you know, more work that is needed to be done in villages and in towns and in our cities. Our growth plan commits another $2.5 billion over the next 3 years. We've created Sask Builds, a new Treasury Board crown. You'll want to talk a little bit about that, I'm sure, at the Bear Pit. I hope you do, because Don McMorris is no longer the health minister, and he's welcoming every question he can get. I think Don's here. He is. We created Sask Builds to drive innovation in terms of how we do infrastructure. We took $150 million from the Growth and Financial Security Fund. We're going to leave that balance at about $500 million in the bank account, cash. We took about $150 million to seed this organization, to provide that initial capital to Sask Builds. But that $150 million should buy us a lot more infrastructure than $150 million if we leverage it, if we're open to P3s, if we are ready when the federal government comes, as they say in 214, with the next iteration of Building Canada. And we will be there. We will be there as a partner in that program, and potentially a little bit beyond that as partners for you as we deal with infrastructure needs across our province. But P3s are going to be a part of it. Just as private surgical clinics operating in the public sector have proven to be a necessity to help reduce wait times, and for the first time in a long time, I could tell you, wait times are coming down in the province, not to the level we'd like them at, but our goal is in reach. We have large projects ahead of us, so just like in healthcare, we need to think differently. We need to be creative, and we're going to use private-public partnerships, and we look forward to using those partnerships along with partnerships with our municipal sectors as they look to large and small infrastructure needs in their communities. An important part of our infrastructure plan is also housing. Last year, Saskatchewan led the nation in urban housing starts. They were up 40%. Housing starts since 2007 are up 65% compared to the last 5 years of the previous administration. Rental starts for the last 2 years are 13% higher than the previous 10 years combined. Now, having said that, in the last budget, if you remember, the municipal sector and the real estate industry asked us to provide an incentive, a tax incentive for the construction of apartments. The last word from the Minister, Ken Kravetz, Minister of Finance, is there is yet to be an uptake on that. So maybe we can promote it a little bit better together, because this is an incentive I think quite rightly called for by sector that can lead to more units, more rental units, and we desperately need them. The province's vacancy rate is still way too low, though it's higher than when we took office. Still way too low. And in some communities, Estevan, Moose, others, it is very, 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 very tight. We are making progress, but we need to remain vigilant. Maybe the best evidence of progress is in Lloydminster. I don't know, I'm sure Mayor Mulligan is here. In Lloydminster, housing starts on the Saskatchewan side of the border rose by 24%. On the Alberta side of the border, they dropped by 36%. It's unbelievable. Some people would have said, gee, Roy Simon will be wearing a Rider jersey before that ever happens. But we do need to be vigilant. We know that more is needed. We have additional resources in the growth plan for this. Student housing remains a challenge. We need to be better able to rapidly respond to very tight markets, to develop those systems, and we need to listen to you, and we will. We understand the importance of your wisdom on this particular file and ideas that you may have. We are all ears, and we know that resources are going to be needed into the future. Ladies and gentlemen, Saskatchewan is growing. Pretty obvious statement, I guess, by now. But in the growth, we are becoming more diverse, more dynamic, and increasingly, we are looked to as a leader within Confederation. At the same time, we face unfamiliar challenges. Some are uneasy with the change that's underway. Some believe that more people, that all these people, and more wealth are chipping away at our sense of community. That somehow growth may not be that good. But I submit today that our basic character, the spirit of this province, forged a century ago, has been found to be true in the years since. And that spirit and that character remains steadfast. And if you have a doubt of it, go to Maple Creek. Drive down Pacific Avenue. Have a look at the commercial hotel, established 1884, built by pioneers then. And now, Noy Lim and his partners from the Philippines have come to Saskatchewan, and they have found that same community spirit that some are worried we might be losing. They are pioneers again, building the new Saskatchewan because, why? There is growth here and opportunities for wealth creation here. Ambitious and hardworking, without a doubt, but compassionate and community-minded as well, good neighbors that have our back, people ready to do their part. Saskatchewan people. Yes, Saskatchewan is changing. But because of who we are, and because of who we are becoming, because of where we have been, and because of where we are boldly going, we welcome these new challenges of growth. We will meet them, and we will work to lead the country. Thanks for the chance to be here today.
Mr. Premier, thank you for your words of wisdom, for your enthusiasm as always. We appreciate you sharing your valuable time with SUMA delegates. It is a confirmation of your commitment to the partnership between urban governments and the province. To show our appreciation for your appearance at convention, we've made a donation on your behalf to the Mike Badham Scholarship Fund. Thank you, sir.
Very much for that. It's a great gift. Thank you.
Mike Badham went beyond the call of duty to improve his community. Through service on Regina City Council, his efforts as a school teacher and principal, and on the SUMA Board of Directors. In honor of his passion for education, the Scholarship Fund was created to help support students in the Faculty of Education at the University of Regina, and we make the donation in honor of your own dedication and passion for our province. At this time, I'd like to call Laurent Mougeot, SUMA's CEO and Chief Returning Officer, to explain the process for the election. Laurent?